Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro praises China and condemns the United States during the Workers' Congress in Caracas. Big businesses bet on environmental destruction in the Amazon. And combating imperialism is high on the agenda at the first Patriotic Forum in Haiti. From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South, and I'm Camila Escalante. We begin in Venezuela, as the International Workers' Congress has reached its third day with more than 1,500 participants from different countries, all in Caracas. The Congress was part of the agreements established at the Sao Paulo Forum held in July. President Nicolas Maduro addressed participants, putting forth a proposal for a World Congress of Worker Forces. The president also said that in just 2 weeks of the No More Trump campaign, more than 8 million signatures have been collected in record time, and said that Caracas would hold another great anti-imperialist march of the working class on Saturday.
In the United States, an extremist right-wing faction governs, which took control of the White House with a supremacist, neo-fascist, racist ideology condemned by the very people of the United States. They attempt to cause disorder throughout the world, attack the new centers of power which are emerging in order to reverse the process of an emergency of a world which is multipolar, multi-centered, of a new world geopolitics. That's why you see that the supremacists of the United States show so much contempt for and attacks our sister country, China. The People's Republic of China, the greatest economic power of the 21st century, is subjected to a flurry of attacks, subjected to contempt, with acts of internal destabilization, like we've seen taking place in Hong Kong, and additionally to a trade war, all in an attempt to try to halt China and its process, which cannot be detained, of expansion, of growth, and of economic development as the first great economic power of the 21st century.
The head of the United Nations Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, Alicia Barcenas, has said that the Venezuelan people are suffering because of the sanctions imposed on the Bolivarian Republic. She added that the country is going through a difficult time, pointing out the economic damage caused by the United States' illegal blockade on the country.
We're very worried about the sanctions because we are seeing them have a big impact on the Venezuelan people. What we're trying to do is map out the sanctions and their impact. I think that it's important that people know that the country is going through a difficult moment. For example, in business and exports to the United States, those had a value of around $11 billion, and now they're completely stopped. The investment in the oil industry has been stopped. Imports have been punished, as well as financial transactions.
Staying with Venezuela, the country's foreign minister has expressed Caracas' deep concern over the possible return of armed struggle in Colombia. He was responding to Thursday's announcement that a group of former FARC leaders were taking up arms once again. Arriaza outright rejected the accusations by the Colombian government that other countries are to blame for not fulfilling the peace agreements.
Son públicas y notorias.
The decision taken by the government of Ivan Duque have been very well known. In a series of maneuvers within the peace process, they have led to a loss of trust and legal guarantees, to a violation of the terms agreed, and to a series of systematic violations of human rights. These include the killings of hundreds of former combatants and social leaders. It is outrageous that Ivan Duque seeks to put his own personal responsibility for a deliberate dismantling of the peace process and the refusal to comply with the agreement signed by Colombia with the world and its own people onto third countries.
En un acto deleznable, pretende desplazar hacia terceros países.
The decision by those dissident FARC leaders to return to armed struggle has caused a political storm in Colombia. The FARC political party has repudiated the group and reaffirmed its commitment to peace.
Que es piña madura, anunciamos al mundo. In the early hours of Thursday, the former guerrilla leader Ivan Marquez made a dramatic reappearance. Dressed in combat fatigues, he declared himself the commander of the armed dissidents of the FARC-EP. Alongside Jesus Santrich and Hernán Darío Velázquez, he completely rejected the peace process.
The unilateral changes to the text of the peace accord, the failure of the state to meet its obligations, and the legal trickery have forced us to return to the hills.
Reactions followed swiftly from the FARC political party, the Alternative Revolutionary Forces of the Commons. They said taking up arms again was a grave mistake.
Los firmantes de la alocución.
Those made this announcement have publicly split from our party, and they must assume the consequences of their acts.
Y asumieron las consecuencias de sus actos.
And following the announcement, President Iván Duque took a number of legal and military decisions.
I have asked the Attorney General to issue the necessary arrest warrants to confront the crimes announced in that video, which are a direct attack on Colombia's institutions and society.
The Special Jurisdiction for Peace, the legal body that many former FARC guerrillas have presented themselves to, said the move by the dissidents was a serious challenge to peace.
The news that some members of the FARC are rearming in secrecy shows a failure to comply with the integral system of truth, justice, reparation, and non-repetition. It falls in the remit of the Special Jurisdiction for Peace and without doubt constitutes a grave act for the peace process, which with difficult and great sacrifice has been ongoing in this country. Constructing peace after half a century of internal conflict is difficult, and a path of full uncertainties and doubts. However, the parties have complied with their commitments.
The JEP said the rearming of a small number of former FARC members only benefits those sectors of the right who have always opposed the peace process.
For those who want to continue the war in Colombia are pleased with this announcement. Those sectors of the far right are almost celebrating, asking for the peace accord to be removed from the constitution and demanding a military offensive against not only the dissidents but all those political forces that support the peace.
Other supporters of the peace process called on the government party to cease its attacks on the Havana Accord.
We need to reflect on why this has happened and all the mistakes and failures of the peace process in order to correct them. I think the answer is to implement the peace agreement more swiftly and back with sufficient resources and political will.
Some observers have said it should now be a priority to develop those zones where former combatants are gathered to be retrained and incorporated into civilian life.
Still to come, a judge calls for a former Peruvian president to be detained. We'll find out who after the break. Welcome back. As the Amazon rainforest burns, the interests of big soy and cattle corporations are being called into question. It appears the United States corporation Cargill bet heavily on environmental destruction in the region. Our correspondent Brian Muir has the latest.
After a few days of rain, fires have started up again in the Amazonian state of Rondônia, covering the city of Porto Velho in smoke. Soy production for the international export market is one of the key factors driving the process. New highways cutting through the forest are opening access for agribusiness, and local populations are suffering.
Today, all you see in a large part of our traditional land is soy. All that remains are soy plantations, and now we are barred from going in there. There is a fence, and the owner gave an order not to let any indigenous people in.
International capitalist elites argue that agribusiness is important for economic development and reducing poverty. But the fact is, the mechanized farming techniques employed by the middlemen who supply the big multinational agribusiness corporations with their soy for the US and European markets is not very labor-intensive.
It's more about expanding territory. They use mechanized harvesters. Crop dusting is done by airplanes, so they don't need many workers. The truth is that land ownership in Rondonia has greatly concentrated, and most rural workers have been forced into the cities.
Last year, Cargill Corporation announced that it was going to build a new soy terminal in Rondonia, raising the export capacity of its current terminal from 3.5 million to over 6 million tons per year. As soy farming spreads up along Highway 319 into southern Amazonas, it appears that the company is counting on more environmental destruction to boost its production.
We are the last frontier of forest cover. So agribusiness advances, soy advances. It is progress that they talk so much about, passing over everything in its wake, especially the environment.
As the media turns its attention from the crisis in the Amazon to the hurricane approaching Florida, it looks like these fires are going to continue burning for a long time. Brian Mir, Telesur, Porto Velho.
And you can keep up with Brian in the Amazon by following his Twitter at Brian M. Telesur. Meanwhile, Bolivia's President Evo Morales has said that the whole world has a responsibility to protect the Amazon forest from destruction. Speaking after joining thousands of firefighters helping to put out fires near Bolivia's border with Brazil, Morales said that the Amazon forest is a shared resource that belongs to the world, hence the need for concerted efforts to stop the fires that are currently destroying the Amazon. Last week, Morales suspended his presidential campaign to focus on the wildfires.
It's a global responsibility that is shared with the Paris Agreement. Personally, I didn't agree with it, but it was an important step, and the United States abandoned it. We debated intensely how to face global warming together, that it was an investment, above all else, from the heads of the industrialized world, of an industry that is bringing on the end of life.
The Amazon is also burning in Paraguay, where thousands of wetlands have been destroyed. In just 2 days, the country's remote border town of Bahia Negra saw over 20,000 hectares go up in smoke. Now the public prosecutor has accused 2 cattle farming establishments of starting some of the fires that razed the Chaco forest in the west.
It's believed that some cattle ranchers have deliberately started these wildfires in order to make room for more animals. For some time, this has continued unabated, even as volunteer firefighters and police have appealed for a halt to the illegal and damaging practice. This as they work feverishly to put out the fires threatening the wetlands.
Today we received a police complaint that while firefighters were working to extinguish the fires, these ranchers were fueling the fire, that they were taking advantage of these fires to burn their fields. Therefore, we constitute in 2 establishments, one called San Juan and the other San Jose.
Official figures show that more than 41,000 hectares of forest have been burned in the Chaco region. Many of the fires were deliberately set, despite the fact that there are laws in place against these practices and guidelines to follow.
Every burning must have a specified and authorized time. It must have municipal authorization. It must have all the personnel and systems in place, such as volunteer firefighters on standby, authorization of the environmental attorney and the environmental ministry, as well as from the Science and Technology University.
Bahia Negra's City Hall is the second highest territorial authority. However, the municipality does not have institutional capacity to carry out environmental checks, as the law demands.
These controlled burns require a special permit from the municipality. And in this particular case, we had 2 instances in which they had controlled the prescribed burning. And we, at City Hall, had to take the case to Environmental Secretary.
These fire spots continue in the Chovoreca region, which is just a short distance away from Bahia Negra's downtown area, with a population of about 3,500.
The most we can do is to alert the government, and in this recent case, we also alerted the Emergency Secretary. That is what we did this time.
Volunteer firefighters are working alongside military personnel as they continue to battle the fires that have spread throughout the Chaco region. An airplane sent by the government of Chile will also act as reinforcement.
Moving to South America's Pacific coast, an Ecuadorian judge has granted permission to the Attorney General's office to change criminal charges against Swedish programmer Ola Bini. Now Bini, a friend of WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange, is accused of alleged unauthorized access to a computer system, a crime under Article 234 of Ecuador's criminal code. The change came last minute, as August 29th was when the government's legal 90 days to present the charges expired. Bini was previously accused and jailed without charges by the Attorney General's office for an alleged attack on information systems, but was released in June after being granted the habeas corpus request.
What really calls our attention and leaves us extremely upset is the way the Ecuadorian laws and the constitution are being destroyed. They can change the charges on the 19th day, so we reject this decision by the judge, and we will ensure that all rights are respected, and not just here in our country, where apparently the law and the constitution are unimportant to judges.
In neighboring Peru, a judge has said that former President Alejandro Toledo, who is facing corruption charges, should continue to be detained in solitary confinement until other detention arrangements are set up. Toledo, who was president from 2001 to 2006, allegedly received $20 million from the Brazilian construction company Odebrecht to help them win public work contracts. He's currently facing extradition from the United States after being arrested there in July. Still to come, Algerians take to the streets demanding reform for the 28th consecutive Friday. Stay with us. Welcome back. The First Patriotic Forum in Haiti is continuing its debates on the country's crisis and on the imperialist offensive in the region. Haitian agronomist Jean-André Victor, who also leads the Haitian Patriotic Dessalinian movement, said the democratization of the media and social networks has been a key element to unite people who want to save Haiti from its crisis. Meanwhile, the leader of the landless workers movement in Brazil praised the Cuban people for withstanding the U.S. blockade for more than 60 years. He also stressed that people in Haiti and in the region are getting more aware of the ways in which the United States is putting pressure on their countries.
There is an environment of general indignation, and the popular forces are gathered here to agree on a basic plan. Everyone agrees that the government must go, and the only thing that keeps him in power is the United States. They also agree on the need for a transitional government, because they don't trust the electoral system to call for elections, and there are differences there on who will rule. Then they want an electoral reform, to have a democratic process and an economic emergency program to lift the people out of poverty, and constitutional reform within 3 years.
From the International Assembly of the People, with people from the United States, Brazil, South Africa, Venezuela, and Argentina, we want to accompany the social movements in Haiti. In this context, we hope they can build a national agreement, a plural platform to overcome this crisis. We know this situation does not only affect the country, but the correlation of the forces that are in dispute in the continent and the wider world, between the capital and the popular demands. That is why their actions are so important.
Moving on to Hurricane Dorian, the storm has intensified to Category 3 strength as it bears down on the United States. If the weather system's current track holds, Dorian could be the strongest hurricane to hit Central Florida in over 30 years. Residents near the beach are busy preparing sandbags, and many rush to stores for water and other emergency supplies. Meanwhile, the Miami-based National Hurricane Center issued a hurricane watch for northwestern Bahamas. Due to the trajectory of Hurricane Dorian, Bahamas Bahamas flagship carrier Bahamas Air has announced several changes to its flight schedule for the traveling public in Freeport and Grand Bahama. All Bahamas Air flights on Saturday will be suspended. The airline also informs that the last flight Lauderdale will be scheduled later this Friday, has not been cleared in the United States. This means that passengers who do not possess a U.S. visa will not be processed to board. Keeping with the Caribbean, Guyana's opposition is worried that the merger of the data collected from house-to-house voter registration with the National Register could compromise the integrity of the preliminary electors list. Opposition leader Bharat Jagdeo says he fears this process will cause unnecessary delays in the holding of general elections.
With this merger, the most optimistic scenario is to go to claims and objections in November, because the merger will take about 3 months, and then elections on the 27th of April next year. So you understand that this merger will not improve the database. It is a delaying tactic once again.
We cross to Africa now, where protesters in Algeria have maintained their weekly protests calling for political reform. Demonstrators marched in the capital Algiers for the 28th consecutive Friday, demanding a civilian-led transition. Efforts for dialogue have been unsuccessful, so as protesters have rejected any talks headed by the army or officials from the previous government. Interim President Abdelkader Ben Salah has struggled to hold the country together since the departure of former President Abdelaziz Bouteflika, who stepped down in April after months of protests.
I am addressing the government. If you really want to find a real solution for Algeria, you must rely on the people who are in the street, the real representatives of the Algerian people. But using this panel is a very bad solution.
Ugandan authorities have increased border controls with the Democratic Republic of Congo. Health workers have started checking people crossing the border between Uganda and the DRC for the virus. The Ugandan Ministry of Health confirmed the death of a 9-year-old girl who tested positive for Ebola in Uganda after traveling from the DRC.
The result confirmed positive for Ebola virus. That was yesterday, 29th August 2019. Unfortunately, the girl passed on early this morning.
Southern Africa is currently grappling with a crippling drought that has left millions of people in need of food aid. The drought is also having an adverse impact on livestock, which is the main source of livelihood for the local population. Botswana, Zambia, and Zimbabwe have in the last couple of minutes issued drought alerts following the deaths of thousands of cattle due to dried up water reservoirs. The region has in the last decade suffered from extreme weather conditions ranging from floods to droughts due to the El Niño weather phenomenon. And finally, Ivorians have bid farewell to late musician DJ Arafat, who died on August 12th after being involved in a motorcycle accident. Thousands of fans trooped to a stadium in the commercial capital for a final tribute concert for the singer. DJ Arafat had a huge following across Africa and in the Francophone diaspora communities in France and in Belgium. He popularized the coupé décalé genre, a flamboyant and brash music style.
He's a child who came from the streets. He was on the streets at an early age. He fought hard to make the name he has today. He knew how to fight to become what he is today. And really, it made a big impression on me because he started from nothing and achieved something. He started from scratch. He became the king of the coup décalé. Really, it's something that motivates young people today, those who have nothing, those who are desperate.
We've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telestorenglish.net. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Camila Escalante. Thanks for watching.